Hey y'all. So, unless you've been living in a cave, then like me, you are being inundated with bad news, inflation, store shortages, rising costs, gas prices so high that most of us are staying home other than going to work. And quite frankly, it's all been rather depressing. Some people are even saying it's the end of the world as we know it. If you live long enough, then you've witnessed this phenomenon more than once. Tommy and I are both over 50, so we've seen this a few times. Anyone remember the gas shortages of 1979? You had to wait in line for hours on odd, even days based on your license plates here in Texas. It was gas rationing like none of you younger people have ever seen. My father was killed that year because we ran out of gas, and he and his friend went back to wait in line and get gas and put gas in our vehicle and were killed by a drunk driver. So that was a pretty traumatic year for our family as well as the rest of America due to the bad economy and gas rationing. My dad couldn't imagine the world being much worse than it was right then. It still wasn't the end of the world. It still wasn't the end of the world for most of us, just for him. So how about the 1980s when we used to have drills at school where we hid under our desks with our hands over our head because of a possible nuclear war? It's like, hey, a nuclear bomb might hit, kids, so get under your desk and cover your heads and hope for the best. Fun times. There was a recession in the 80s with over 10% unemployment. And then the stock market crashed and there was Black Monday. We all just kind of made up for the chaos with a lot of hairspray and neon colors. Then along came the 90s, and while there was growth economically, in Usher's Desert Storm and all of the problems with the Middle East. Our politicians will always keep us involved in one war or another. They always have. There's World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, the Gulf War. How many of our youth have we lost in just those wars alone? Over 600,000 people. How would you like to spend the year after high school fighting a politician's war? While the wars of the 90s may not have affected you, it did affect many of us. My then husband was off in the Gulf War and barely made it back in time for our second son to be delivered. It was a very trying time for us. But then we were blessed because my husband came home, whereas many husbands did not. Then we come to Y2K. That was the year we were going to leave the 1900s behind and enter into the 2000s. Many people tried to convince us that computers were not equipped to handle this change on December 31st, 1999. They said that everything was just going to stop working at midnight. The power would shut down, the banks would not be opening, and life as we knew it was about to end. Many of us seriously prepared for this. Others, notably some religious zealots, committed suicide in mass numbers. There were mass suicides. People were so afraid of this event happening. Some of us, myself included, stayed up until after midnight and nothing happened. Nothing happened. It's like, okay, maybe it's not at 12 o'clock. Maybe it's at 12:01. Maybe it's not 12 o'clock Central Time. Maybe it's 12 o'clock California time. Nothing happened. So anyway, midnight came and went, and we were all just stuck with some extra canned foods and toilet paper. So we all made it through that, only to end up in 2020 and a worldwide pandemic. It was something like none of us have ever experienced before and hope to never experience again. We had deaths from the virus, we had lockdowns, we had suicides, and the economy just started to plummet. Many businesses could not recover from it and shut down. It's 2 years later now, and we still aren't recovered from it. We have supply chain shortages. We have a new Russian war with Ukraine. And while there are help wanted signs everywhere, you have no one applying for those jobs. So people are predicting food shortages, brownouts, blackouts. Car parts are not easily obtainable. We're having a hard time finding car parts to repair vehicles. New car prices are now more than some people paid for their homes. The price of some grocery items have doubled, if not tripled. And gas prices are through the roof. The airlines are canceling flights. There's a shortage of pilots and doctors and nurses. And some people are starting to lose hope of things ever going back to normal. So is this going to be the end of the world as we know it when none of these past events were, despite so many people believing that it would be? Will we all look back on this 10 years from now and laugh about it like we do Y2K? The truth of it is that we don't know. I don't know. You never know until it's too late if you coulda, shoulda, woulda. What we do know is once it hits the fan, it's probably too late to do something about it. Right now is the time to learn how to survive in a world that is different than what you have come to know as normal. Prepare for food shortages by learning to garden, learning to can, learning to cook from scratch, stocking up with items from the store, and learn to store those items so you don't open a bag of rice and find it full of maggots. Learn to hunt, learn to fish, learn to forage, and learn to live in a more primitive world than you are used to. Because these skills may be the difference between life and death. Prepare for gas shortages by getting a motorcycle that uses less gas. Buy a bicycle, store some extra gas. Carpooling might be an option for some of you. Public transportation. When I was a kid, we didn't have 2 cars. My mother walked to the laundromat. My mother walked to the grocery store. It can be done. You might even need to move closer to work or get a job closer to home. We have to do what we can to survive. You can prepare for economic disaster by paying off as much debt as you can. Skip the Disney trip this year. Pay off some credit card debt. There's no guarantee that you're still going to have a job in this economy. One very important thing you can all do is to vote smartly in November. Your vote matters. And it matters this year probably more than ever in your lifetime. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but pay close attention to who's doing what. Now, I'm never going to be all doom and gloom, the sky is falling, and all this nonsense. I am about preventing chaos in my life if I can, and if not, then finding hope in the midst of that chaos. And I do that by not getting caught with my pants down. Do I personally think this is the end of the world as we know it? No, I do not. I've seen too much to think that. I'm not easily fooled at this age. I believe wholeheartedly that this too shall pass. It's just another bump in the road of what we call America. However, there's always that possibility, and I would rather over prepare and not need it than not prepare and end up desperate. I'll leave you with a little Bible verse. You don't have to be a Christian to understand it or to appreciate it. And that is Proverbs chapter 20, verse 4, which says, "The sluggard does not plow in the autumn. He will seek at harvest and have nothing." So don't be the sluggard. Thank you guys for watching. And if you haven't already, please subscribe.